Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming again for our lecture to this fourth public lecture in the series of MTN Jakarta Residency. And today our theme of public lecture is the discourse of global contemporary art in the history of art exhibition. And the lecturer is Havranek. He's us right now, and I will read his biography. Havranek is an art historian who currently serves as a vice dean of the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague. His work focuses on international collaboration, social inclusion, and sustainability, driven by his interest in the history of artistic exchange after World War II. Previously, he served as director of Transit 2002 until 2015 and co-founded Transit Display in 2007. Havranek has curated numerous international exhibitions such as the U3 Triennale, Jakarta Biennale 2017, and Manifesta A. His writings have been published by the Center Pompidou, MoMA, and MIT Press, while he has also edited important books such as Atlas of Transformation in Italy. And for the abstraction of the public lecture, we also read So the Cold War was not only a geopolitical conflict, but also a stage for cultural negotiations, where art functioned as an instrument of ideological soft power among the first, second, and third worlds. Within the Eastern Bloc, this dynamic produced a form of double colonization, the horizontal domination of Soviet ideology and the vertical domination exerted by local state apparatuses. This complexity transcends the simple East-West binary and invites comparison with post-colonial contexts such as those in Southeast Asia. Divergent meaning assigned to artistic form, such as abstraction as a mode of resistance in Eastern Europe versus social realism as a project of national modernity, like in Indonesia, reflect these different political goals. The history of exhibition, such as Medicine de la Terre, 1989, while celebrated for presenting non-Western artists on ostensibly equal footing, nonetheless carries enduring colonial legacy. It also marks the beginning of an anthropological phase, or something characterized by the provincialization of the West in the interpretation of global culture. The legacy of the Cold War, therefore, continues to shape today's global art institution, raising a pressing question about how curatorial practices might expose and resist the rules of the game inherited from various forms of colonization and self-colonization. So, like before yesterday, before yesterday, we have 2 hours in this session, but we will dedicate our time for Phil to present this lecture until finish. Please, Phil.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation and for warm welcome. As you said, I was here last time in Jakarta in 2017 as part of the curatorial team of Biennale Jakarta, and together with, at the time, Melati Suryadharma was the artistic director, and also Mas Hendro Rianto was part of the curatorial team, and Philippe Pirot was the Belgian curator. And so I had really an opportunity to study and to look into history of Indonesian art. And today I was thinking, what shall I tell you? Because the questions that I was asked are really complicated, historical, ideological, cultural exchange, politics. And finally, I thought the best would be to show you as much as I can images. So you will see a lot of images, and through the images and diagrams, I would like to comment on those questions. And also, I mainly will show you examples of two exhibitions we did together with a collective called Transit that was mentioned already. And I will start with a little bit with history. This was an image from yesterday that we were drawing a map actually, and I really like the map because it looks like completely abstract, just drawing. But actually, what was the map about? It was about the places. We were a collective of 5 or 6 people here, and each of us draw a place where he or she is coming from. So I think the most western city was Aberdeen, and the most city was Palu, the island in Indonesia. And in the group, we are kind of trying with the force to move the pencil from one side to the other, also symbolizing that sometimes there are tensions that we live in a place we don't like, we would like to come back, but there are some forces driving us back and forth. There's also politics, private life, etc., etc. So these are our lives. Our lives are somehow entangled with forces that are bigger and stronger than our individual subjective wills. And that's why I wanted to start with some historical introduction about my region. And not only showing to my region because it's me, but it's a little bit of geopolitics. And it finally shows also why my generation, I would say, it's a generation that was living under the communism, under the communist rule that existed since 1917 in Russia, since 1948 in Czech Republic, until 1989 when Berlin Wall fell or was destroyed. There are 2 ways to interpret this historical event. That's also quite interesting that very usually you can read Berlin Wall just fell down, but it didn't fall down by itself. There are people that were moving this wall down, and the explanation why did that happen? They will try another one. So the reason why this happened, that the wall fell down, are until today quite unclear. If you remember there was a Russian president, his name was Gorbachev, and he started something like transformation of the society that in Russian was called perestroika. And perestroika means that the current politics is kind of taken and transformed within to be more liberal, more open, more human, and more less censorship. But I will go back to the maps and give very, very short comment to the maps. This is the region I'm coming from. It's the region somewhere this one. And it's interesting to see that there were always some monarchies, It's called Central or Eastern Europe, and this shows like for 400 years there were monarchy. One monarchy was Austro-Hungarian, it was this one, and the other was German Empire. And if you think about this Austro-Hungarian monarchy that my country was part of, here there is more precise map of this only Austro-Hungarian monarchy. And you see this is the Czech Republic, this is Moravia, this is Ukraine, Austria, Styria, Croatia, Bosnia. Each of these countries have different language. People speak different languages. They look slightly differently. They're all kind of whitish, but in a way, they look a little bit differently, and they have different cultures. So in this monarchy, for 400 years, there were maybe 20 nations that were living together within different languages, having one official language that was German, because the center of the monarchy was in Austria. This is another map. I really like maps. I'm sorry. This is a map from 1938. It was quite an interesting moment in the history for the country of Czechoslovakia, because it's the beginning of Second World War, and Hitler was starting his expansion in Europe. And the first demand that he asked to, or the first ultimate demand was that he wants this part of the country, because there were German-speaking inhabitants living there. And at the time, it was France, United Kingdom, and what was the third state? Mainly France and UK, that signed a contract with Hitler that Czechoslovakia should give him his part of the lands, and he will not start the Second World War. It was a very smart trick that often happens in the history, the same happened with Ukraine or with different countries now, that actually he acquired this part of the land, but all the military bases were on the frontiers of the country. So then when he started the war, he simply went through because there were no borders, and he could invade the rest of the country. Then it was the beginning of Second World War. Then in 1945, here you have another map. And this is Russia. And Russia, as you know, liberated this part of the Eastern and Central Europe. So suddenly you have Russian army that is liberating from Nazi German soldiers. And the Russian army went up to here, this border, actually, exactly. And this deal was made also before. And it was a deal made in 1945 in Yalta, in between Roosevelt, the American president, and Chamberlain as British first minister. And actually, after 1945, they made a deal that these countries will belong to the Russian influence. They keep actually all the countries that they liberated. And my country was part of this liberated. And so it opened a history of 40 years of communism that actually started with end of the World War II. That's another funny map. This is from 1963, and this is for ideological and political map. It says the forces of the peace will win, and it shows the whole Earth, the whole planet, right? And the division is divided in three parts. One is socialistic states, people here, communism. Then there are imperialist countries that start the war in the bracket, and this is US, Australia, eventually Western European countries. And then there are countries, of course, what was at the time called the third world, or the countries, but here they don't use this terminology first, second, and third world. But the terminology that is used, these are countries that fight for their liberty, for the liberation, and are peaceful countries. Because this is actually a map of the peace. So it was called the map of the peace. It says, the logics, that it says that only at the time there were 3 million of people living on the planet. It was in 1963 when this map was designed. And it says there is 3 million of humans, people living on the planet. There is 1 million of people living in socialistic countries. Then there is 1.2 million people, humans living outside of attacking countries, or peaceful countries, we can say 1.2 million people countries, and only 650,000 people living in imperial states that were considered to be war-causing states. So the logic of this map says the peace will win because we are many. We are 1 billion of socialistic people and 1.2 billion of people that are for peace. They are liberating their own countries. Which part of it is Indonesia here, and only 650,000 in parallel. Thanks. And the last one, this is the last one. This is more Western map of the planet, because the previous one, it was socialistic or communist map, imagining ideal peace, and this is how Western geography and geopolitical science sees this period from 1947 till 1991. And this is the classical division of Western political sciences, dividing the first world, which is first the West, which is in green, then the second world, which is the communist part, and the so to speak the third world, which is in yellow. Today's, of course, we don't use this terminology anymore. We speak more about global south. Eventually, these countries are not considered to be a one block anymore. And so this was a kind of very, very fast flight over actually certain terminologies and ideas about geopolitics after 45, but from the perspective of Central or Eastern Europe. Because one has to always think about its own situation, I think. You know, we were very often told, especially by Western universalism, that there is an idea about the world, about the planet, about the politics, about geopolitics, and this is the idea that is the same for everyone. But as we know, it depends where we are situated, where we stand as scientists, as humans, where we look at the planet, from which point. And this situated view is today very, very important. Now, why all this complicated, or why this historical action? I would say that this history of not being independent is something that also colonial countries know. I think Eastern Europe, the region itself, is not properly a colonial region, a region that was colonized, but there were many discussions actually in Eastern Europe, in Russia, in Balkan countries, whether these countries were colonized, because they were always managed by some other big empire, whether it was Austro-Hungarian Empire, as I showed you, or Russian Empire. So the small countries that speak different languages, there are maybe 20 or 25, they just always belong to some bigger country and was in a way subordinated and directed from a center that was not really something that they would choose. And very often cultural historians they describe certain notion of identity crisis of these countries, because actually they don't know, they were trying to get their independence, but these fights were always interrupted by some bigger forces. So there is a big narrative about history with big H, saying like, you can fight as you want, but at the end of the day, it will be always the stronger, bigger empire that will eat you and will manage you, and you have to subordinate to this rule. Now, this creates a big tensions in culture, in art, because that's what interests us. And that's why why I started with this history, because my generation was a bit obsessed by by trying to understand actually this history sometimes, you know. And these countries were often described as satellites. It's quite interesting term from astronomy, right? These are small planets that are turning around bigger planets. And this satellite position well describe this a little bit traumatic question and traumatic situation of this country. So what have these countries in common with former colonial countries and with nowadays debate about decolonization and post-colonial situation is about finding a relation to its own proper identity, proper history, languages, and especially the relation to power, to the bigger power. Now, I try also to draw some connections that because these are important dates that I mentioned. 1948, this is beginning of communism, and 1989, this is end of communism and beginning of what, you know? That was a big question that also my generation faced, because when this changes in 1989 started, we were part of the movement, and this period was called transformation. And this movement, actually, it was not clear what happens, right? There are moments in the history, for example, if you read Alain Badiou, who is a big French philosopher and writer, he sees the history first as a kind of long development with very straight interactions. And he says every 200 years or after each period, you have really an interaction. And during this, he calls it événement, like revolutions, moments. And during a very short time, the society comes into the point that people can rearrange everything. They can decide about it. For Indonesia, I'm not such a knowledgeable about the history of Indonesia, but of course it would be moments of the independence and then beginning of reformation, for example. These are the moments when the country could reorganize its own matters according to its own will. And here the will of the people, of the humans, of people engaged politically or socially engaged people is very important, because the history is not written. Nobody knows what will happen. At this moment, at this crossroads, there are really alternatives of the future that deploys, and people can decide what will happen. But these moments are very, very short. And I was part of this very, very short moment here in 1989. That could be 1998 in Indonesia, the moment when the rules of the society were completely changed. As an example, I can give you, because during the communism, during socialism, there was practically no private property existing in Czech Republic. So people could only own their own stuff. I mean, what they have in their apartment, clothes, a car, but nothing else. They couldn't own a flat, they couldn't own a house. The factories were public, everything was public actually, except your own stuff that you use every day. You could buy this, and that was it. And in 1989, when the revolution came, what they call the privatization started. So imagine all these factories, public spaces, terrains, houses, private houses, all this suddenly was privatized, was sold to private owners. And this was a competition, and there were different economic systems. But as an example of this change, when you look at it from the economical point of view, it was a substantial, a dramatic change that changed all social relations also, because it's really different if you live, you have no, I'm not afraid that you live on the street. If there is a state-owned housing, simply the state provides you a place, a room, right? It doesn't have to be very luxurious. It was very poor, to be honest. But at the end of the day, it was always something. You cannot enter the street, because actually there is always something that state has to provide. While in a year from this moment, when the housing was privatized, suddenly people, of course, whether they bought a house, they would have to have money, credit, banks, and all this capitalistic machine started. So, this happened at one moment, and actually what was interesting that there were different scenarios on the table, and of course, political, economical scenarios. There were at least two of them. And this is, sorry for a longer historical insight, but I think it will be more fun, maybe more arty after that. This is another historical moment that actually illustrates these alternatives of the future that opened up in 1989. There were two alternatives, as I said, on the table, political and economical. One was simply become a liberal, Western, democratic, capitalist society. And the other was what they called at the time third way. The third way was an idea that was invented in 1968 during the socialism. And it was a group of politicians and economists in 1968 that started to reform actually socialism. Because socialism at the time was really pretty harsh. It was a censorship. It was authoritative regime that didn't allow people to study, to travel, and really controlled the society. While the group of communist leaders, politicians of highest rank started to reform it from inside. And they said that we have to build something like socialism in human face. Meaning to take some, bring some ideas and it's an assemblage actually of Western liberalism, so some liberal practices from the West, like freedom of speech, cancellation of censorship, open up country to political pluralism, and make some economic reform. So these are major ideas for this third way. And it ended badly with this photo that is famous because this is a Russian tank. Russian army came to the small satellite and they were saying, no, it's going too far. You would leave the socialistic camp. We stopped it, and it was stopped as a military, as an invasion. Russian army invaded the country and stopped its reformation efforts in 1968. But 20 years after, in 1989, still these politicians are alive and were thinking, maybe we should continue not as capitalistic democracy, but we should maybe continue as the socialism with human face. So there were two scenarios on the table in 1989. And this is what you call événement, that you have one vote in the parliament, actually, or not, it was even not in the parliament, it was just top party. So 12 people met and they were voting which scenario will be chosen. And there was a scenario chosen that the country becomes liberal capitalistic democracy and all the property will be privatized. While this scenario proposed to keep the, for example, housing in some factories, the state property, wait, and build up a kind of alternative system, third way. And I'm showing you all this because first, I'm from the generation that was personally involved, and the exhibitions and also the artistic, the art that deals with these ideas of society, changes, and politics was substantial for me and for my generation. That's the first reason why I'm showing you this. And the second reason is that while you run a cultural organization, as I did for 20 years, or when you create exhibition, I think we should always think about a third way. What does it mean? It means that there are always, alternatives on the table that are given. This is called the whole event is called the rule of the game, right? You have rules of the game. You try what you do with the rules of the game. And I think actually you look at the rules of the game, and first idea you have you negate it. You say these are rules of the games, and I don't play against the rules. That's the first idea you can have. Or you say, okay, I accept the rules of the game, and I will go to play this game. But I think there is always a third way. You can be neither saying that you will play according to it, you will not reject it, but you will try to bypass, find a way that doesn't necessarily end up in negation or doesn't end up in acceptance. You play with the rules according to some scenarios, according to some protocols, according to some politics, according to some intuitions, maybe ancient stories. This is a terminology of words that I found useful when we speak about this third wave. It's very much linked with the terminology of decolonization, or not necessarily decolonization always, but also sometimes it's about actually how to escape the rules if you are not happy with them. The first one is a French term, it's called détournement. It's from situationism, which was really interesting movement in 1950s. It was a movement of artists, writers, and political thinkers. And it started as artistic practice. While the artists, they were using the symbols of dominant culture. You could, for example, take famous symbols of Red Cross, as communism, and to play these symbols, to reverse them, make fun of them, make assemblages, collages. So you take a symbol that everybody knows what does it mean. It can be McDonald's or KFC, whatever. You take a symbol and you play and you kind of deconstruct it. You reverse the meaning and you exhibit it or you show it to the people. And they are surprised. They say, okay, we can play with this. We can play with these powerful symbols in a way that are not completely negating them, but they are playful. But these symbols are changing their original meaning and they are changing their original form. Then you have other words like reappropriation, including marginalized public, countermapping of socialist art and monuments, vernacular adaptation, infrapolitics, everyday resistance, and vernacular translations. I just selected these terms because I think they characterize what we did with transit. We use these approaches and just maybe remind them when you will look at the images and on the exhibitions that I will show you. Well, now I will show you first example. This was an exhibition we did together with Transit and Curator. So I have to show you exhibitions and comment on the exhibition and artworks. And this geopolitical introduction was made to understand the background of this thing. We were invited to do an exhibition in a pretty Porsche museum in US, in New York. And we were invited because it was an initiative that existed in 4 different countries in Central Eastern Europe. And the invitation came and they were saying like, you do such a great, interesting things for states. We are interested to know more about your culture, but you don't know much. You don't know practically anything. And so you should introduce us and to your culture and what is happening in Eastern Europe. And of course, on the one hand, we were happy to be invited. We were happy to present and represent the culture of the region. On the second level, it's a bit difficult because, as you know, there is always an idea, prefigured idea, pre-existing idea of a culture that metropolis or big cultures have. Make it simple, in the centers like New York, London, Paris, big imperial metropolitan centers with old colonial history, they always know, right? They know what is Indonesian culture, what is Japanese culture, they know what is Eastern European culture, but it's just their idea, which is very narrow, and they are interested to know more, but in the same time, you are already categorized. While you invite it, you already culturally categorized, and there is kind of essence of your culture that is already in the mind of people when they go to see the exhibition. So we try to play with this idea of one hand that we were far away, they didn't know much about the culture, and also if they knew something, what they knew was some kind of stereotype coming from the Cold War. So we saw that it would be nice actually to do something a bit. I will show you, you will understand. These are press notes, and we built it up a spaceship, a rocket, in the exhibition space. I will show the images, and these were some press quotes, and the press quotes quite nicely show that as we build it up, I will show you how it looks. Understand better. So this was what we built it, you know, kind of reconstruction a little bit of the rocket. But what was the first idea or first press quote was like, this is a Russian spaceship. They built it on the top of New Museum, but actually it's not a Russian spaceship. Don't be aware, you know. Don't be afraid. Russians are not invading the New York. It's just an exhibition. And so there is, of course, this old fear, you know, if somebody comes from Eastern Europe, that the Russians are coming. They are coming with a rocket and they are invading Europe. And so we were happy with this because it was a little bit good understanding of the joke, or it was not only joke, but there was a humor in this idea to build a spaceship. And one thing, I didn't bring the image, it's a pity, but we were really proud that there was somebody coming from NASA TV, NASA, you know, the spaceship program, and he was an astronaut actually, and he came to see the exhibition because he read that it's a Russian rocket that is exhibited in the New Museum, and he didn't know anything about art, but he was very interested in Russian spaceships, so he came and he made kind of reportage for this NASA TV, and it was fun. Yeah. So this is something. These are also some terminologies that we used for explaining this exhibition that was based on the simulation of rocket, and you know. These are terms you may know, othering, meaning creating the other. It's Edward Said, famous book about Orientalism, where he describes how the West created the Oriental other, the Oriental culture, etc. Creolization, it's a term that we try to adapt actually these post-colonial terminologies into situation of Eastern Europe, because we felt that we are facing the same situation as cultures of colonized countries were facing. And here, that's maybe more interesting. We choose I will show you two examples, or maybe one. This is a historical movie from 1963, and it's called, it's not really visible, but it's called It's a Czech movie, science fiction movie about a flight into the cosmos, and the design of the exhibition was based on the design of this movie. And why we selected a science fiction movie to as a plot for an exhibition? From three reasons. Because we think that these are characteristics of science fiction genre from Frederick Jameson. is a great writer, and he wrote a book about science fiction. And first he says that science fiction is like a detector. It detects, looks into the society, and it sees the potential of future development, opportunities, but also catastrophes, of course. It discovers the fears, the emotions of the moment, etc. So science fiction is very free in mapping what we live and what we consider our actual lives. Second reason is that science fiction actually doesn't describe the future. We always think, this is the future. No, it's the current moment that is projected to the future. It's not a real future. It's based on the analysis of now, what is crazy now, what is beautiful, what makes us afraid, and we take this element, this phenomena, and we kind of project it in the future. So science fiction can be also viewed or must be looked at as analysis of contemporary society with hyperbole, hyperbole, which is kind of exaggeration, with the kind of, we take one phenomena and make it much bigger, much important than it is actually, and this what science fiction does. It takes some phenomena from today and make it much bigger and projects it in the future. So he says that science fiction carries both utopian desires, so something that you can invent radically better society, which today could be something like world building. This is very fancy today in relation with computer games and gaming, that artists are working a lot with building new worlds through the games. And this is very similar approach, but this is actually an approach of science fiction that is adapted to computer games. And also it doesn't clean the problems from the current society. It just puts these problems or these ideological constraints into the more cosmological composition. And then he says also that science fiction is historical in a sense that it really shows more the contemporary, and you can see the development of science fiction, the problems of science fiction in the history. So now I will go more to this. I don't bore you. This is this interesting 1963 film. If you like old movies, really, it's really worth to see, because you also can make really interesting viewing of science fictions coming from Russia and from communist world and from America. And what very often happens, and it's very interesting, for example, with this, it was written and filmed in Czech Republic, in socialistic country, but the scenario plot was owned by Hollywood. And they made a similar film in US, which happened also with another movie, which is much older. This is very old. It's one of the first science fiction movies made by Russia in 1924. And the plot, the story, it's called Aelita. And as you can see, there are beautiful costumes made by avant-garde artist Natalia Goncharova in 1924. So it's also aesthetically and architecturally a very beautiful movie. And again, this Russian movie tells a story of a nation living on Mars that is kind of tyrannic, that has kind of tyrannic government, authoritative government, and communists from Earth fly to Mars to liberate these people from that government and bring communism to Mars. And there is a love story, of course, inside. It's kind of simple, but very funny story. And American studios also bought this plot and made American version of the science fiction movie. So it's really interesting how, I guess, of course, because the universe, the cosmos, is the ultimate aim, everybody wants to cover this space. But for both parts, for Americans and for Russians, cosmos always was also about the peace. That's also very interesting that Actually, it was ideologically, which ideology wins in the cosmos. In the cosmos, it's like metaphysics, you know, it's like almost the God decides which is better, whether it's the communism or it's capitalism. On the earth, we are just fighting, but we have higher judge, which is the cosmos, which is the universe. So if you have American movies or if you have Russian movies, they always travel to cosmos and they play the roles. And now it depends who is the good and who is the bad, right? So when it's a Russian film, it's always Russians who want to create the peace, while when it's Americans, it's Americans. And that's a dispute that happens on Earth, but it juxtaposes it to another space. So this was a little bit this is an image of the works or one of the groups that was exhibited on this exhibition, and I choose this image because it's a group called Irvin from Slovenia, and they invented or kind of work according to a strategy that they call over-identification. And I'm not sure, maybe you feel what this over-identification means, or you can feel it a little bit because they are dressed, you know, very seriously. And there are very strange symbols on the walls, the posters and artworks. Some of them are related with the Christian symbols. Some of this one, for example, is almost Nazi poster. It says like, it's a German word for the capital of Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia, of the country. So actually, what they mean by over-identification, you can read it here. It was a word they kind of invented or discovered or strategy, and it's well described by Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek, and he says that if there is a strong ideology of fascism or kind of Orthodox Christianity or some other, you know, very strong ideologies, they wouldn't criticize these ideologies, but they would over-identify with them to show how strange consequences they can bring. I don't know if understandable, but for us it was also an idea which we used with this exhibition. You know, we over-identified this Russian spaceship arriving in New York because it's absurd in a way, and it shows when we continue with this over-identification longer and longer, it kind of shows its own contradictions to deploying it. Now I will show the exhibition space. So we thought, okay, we have had a lot of materials, maybe 200 artworks. The space was pretty small, so we thought that we divide the space in 3 parts. And this is not very well visible, but this was my favorite thing. It's this teleportation, right? That we can step on it. No, teleport. It didn't work there, but we almost reached the point that it worked. And the space was divided in 3 parts. We had a lot of archival photos that were changing and showing different, maybe hundreds of photos of archives. Here, we call this space communication room, and there was a big screen, and there was a projector and online connection, and we organized discussions there with people from Eastern and Central Europe, online live discussions. So it was like in a real spaceship when the astronauts talk, you know, to the headquarters, and they are exchanging, and it was quite nicely working. So we invited also guests from the city to speak to their friends. So it was kind of online bridge to Eastern Europe. Here you can see, yeah, and there were also some films that were screened on the big screen. And this was kind of the center of the exhibition. Paradoxically, actually, this is the exhibition itself. And we kind of made this decision that we will exhibit as a storage, as a pure storage. You have a lot of, there were small sculptures, bigger sculptures, videos, objects, collages, drawings, paintings, and we all stored in this small space. Is the idea also like saying, look, this is yet uncategorized, fresh. These are like samples. When you fly to Mars, take the samples of the stones, of the air and everything, you bring it in your spaceship, and then it will be culturalized and kind of classified according to different art historical or anthropological or ethnographical methodologies, right? So the idea was to make also a bit over identification this unclassified material. This is one of the works that was exhibited here. I selected this work because it was pretty important artist and work for us. This is a performance from 1977, and it shows one interesting phenomena or element. And so I can continue. I'm not tired too much. A little bit, right? So I said 15 minutes, I will try to finish. This is an important piece of performance art. It's from 1976 or 77. Actually, there are two performances. And the name of the artist is Jiří Vanda. He's from Czech Republic. And this was very much used photography, Western art history, Western press, because it was showing a kind of hippie artist, you know, that is standing in the middle of important public square during the communism with long hairs. And he's in the position of Jesus Christ, of course, a little bit like this, you know, embarrassing people to really walk easily on the street. And all Western press or Western art history that was reading this performance as this is the biggest protest, not biggest, but this is a small protest against the communism. This is how artists are protesting against violation of human rights during the communism. And it was often reproduced and exhibited with this legend. While when you ask the artist himself, he says, for me, it was not at all a kind of political performance. I was really curious about, I wanted to interact with the people. My point were the people, what they think, why I'm doing this strange figure, why I'm standing like this. I try to somehow make people react. And nobody reacted. Sure. People just went around, but he hoped that something will happen. You know, he would like make this speech, like was asking him, "Why do you stand here? What's the problem?" He would say, you know, I try to perform performance artist and to make a dialogue actually. And he was not thinking about criticizing the communism. He was really thinking about engaging a dialogue in the public space, people that passing by. And I'm showing this example as why it's so important to not be interpreted by, why pay attention to historical interpretation, the voice of the artist, of course, and not always to accept the simplest interpretation that actually comes from an idea that is already written and given. That artists are here to protest against the communism, but it's just pre-ordered idea. And in this storage, there were many birds flow. This is another piece of this artist that I find really nice and funny. It's also very old, it's 1978. And these are small cubes of sugar, you know. And here, of course, you can think about, or his way was very small, right? Like this. And his idea was, when you look at minimal art, American minimal artists like Donald Chuck, Soleil, he said, I like this art, but I wouldn't do it so big, I wouldn't use so precious materials, expensive to make these boxes, so I can make the same sculpture with a very small, everyday pieces of sugar, and plus it's sweet. So I think it's very ironical and humorous and funny way how one can relate to American minimalism to make such a sculpture. These are just some details, and this is very interesting artist too. He doesn't give actually his name. He doesn't use his name, so you wouldn't find much about his name is Goran Đorđević. He's originally from Serbia. And at one moment, he had an idea that that art is over. I think he was very much thinking about Marcel Duchamp and the ready-made, and but much later in the 1950s and the 60s and in the 80s, he was born in 50. So in 1980s, he started to do only copies of different famous paintings. But not only paintings. Here you can see he uses. He made, for example, a copy of Mondrian, and he says that actually we should de-articize art. We should not look at art as on originals, but we should build museums, new institutions that will exhibit only copies and will look at art as a kind of Western invention. That was interesting at the moment, but doesn't apply today. Why this strange idea? He gives one interesting example. When you look, for example, at the paintings from Renaissance, from medieval times, old paintings, they were always hanging in the churches. And their main function was to be religious paintings for believers or the churches. They were not considered to be artworks, and we understood them today. Only with the rise of the museum and enlightenment, when the Louvre started in 1790 in France, we took these paintings from Europe, from the churches, but the same happened in Asia. We took the religious objects from the churches, we replaced them into the institutions, and we look at them as on aesthetical, artistic objects. And he says that we are actually adding one layer, the content, to the intrinsic content of these works that were not there originally. And also the proof is that actually the artists in medieval times, they were considered to be workers. They were not considered to be masters, artists, They were considered to be craftsmen. Very well paid, well organized craftsmen that were here to design and to design the churches. And what happened later with art, 400 years later, that we took these objects and made aesthetical, artistic objects out of them. So this is according to historical development, and we are in a new phase when we should think about de-articize this object, not only give them back the religious value, that's one possibility, but to look at this operation of aestheticization that museums and institutions are doing and consider it as art or as culture itself and look at it as an anthropological procedure. That's why he's building this kind of strange, museums inside the museums. He's actually building museums inside the museums. And we executed also one part of it. And if you find something he did, for example, this exhibition in China, where he translates all these famous, this is Matisse, for example, I don't know what is this, but all these are very famous paintings, and he just painted the copies of these paintings, and he translated in Chinese, this famous diagram from Alfred Bad from the Museum of Modern Art, where he explains how modern art started and how does it develops. And he kind of is the focus in showing all this construction, how this idea of modern art was constructed. But if you look at it, this is not as aesthetical view, but as some kind of anthropological procedure. In other words, this is an artist that also exhibited in Jakarta 2013. Our friend Babi Badalov, very beautiful collection. So I will go faster. My point was to show you another exhibition rapidly. Then also we were interested in this idea of Bertolt Brecht. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's a famous thing, alienation effect. And it's more that actually we could not reach it with this exhibition, but that's something what we wanted to reach maybe with the spaceship, that you alienate the visitor, that the visitor doesn't feel really super wild, super natural, super easy, super kind of understanding everything, but he used it within the theater, showing that actually to create criticality through an aesthetical distance, meaning that if you come to the theater, people are actually not acting dramatically, but they are very civil, maybe they're very normal, actually, not playing as actors, but being very normal, maybe a little bit naive. And this kind of effect of not getting what you are expecting to get create an idea or create an alienation of the visitor from that. Now, rapidly, I will describe another exhibition, and then we can have time to discuss. This was also an exhibition curated with the same group of two other curators. One is from Austria, Georg Schauhammer, and the other is from Budapest, Dora Reiki. And this exhibition was part of Manifesta, and it was called Constitution for Temporary Display. It was a little bit different problematics that this spaceship exhibition, but again, I think the idea can be explained pretty simply. And what we did, we invited 35 artists, international artists, and what we tried to play or what we tried to create was the situation of self-organization and democracy. I know that in Indonesia, Gotong Royong, who organize herself collectively very well, while in Europe, everything might be written on paper, how people will be organized. People are obsessed by describing how the things will have the rules, etc., etc. So here what we try to do, we try to really to radically say, okay, we selected you, 35 artists, and from this moment, we decided to put everything collectively together. Starting with the money, starting with the spaces, everything that is available, resources that are available from the organization is happening, because at the time it's quite well economically it's quite well-founded institution. I think we had like 300,000 euros or 350,000 euros for production of our works. So that's pretty some money, right? So we said, we curators, we don't distribute this money. We will decide together. You will go, or we will go. Or how shall we actually decide what will happen? We organized such meetings, and it was pretty surprising because first we said, okay. Before the meeting starts, we put the camera and we record the process. Do you agree? It's okay. And we saw like, of course, it will be okay, but the artist saying, no, I don't want to be recorded. And it started with this, and So then, for example, 3 artists didn't want to be recorded, and the rest wanted to be recorded. And we said, well, what to do actually? And then he said, okay, so they said, maybe we just pause the recording while we are talking and you can record others. So it was like a big meeting with 35 people where we should distribute all this money and responsibilities. But it ended up, it started with a text actually. This is, I put it in the translator, so you have it in Bahasa Indonesia. I hope it's a okay translation, but it's a long text and it's like a questionnaire about listing all possibilities, all options that an exhibition offers. Imagine you are flying to some planet and you have to organize 35 people. How this will proceed? If there is no leader, if nobody knows what to do. So we try to list it all, what an exhibition could do, what are our duties eventually, what shall we distribute, how shall we decide, etc. And during this meeting, we tried to find answers on these questions. They are longer, they are long, it's like 3 pages. And we tried to find the answers. And actually, we had like half a year, pretty long time. It was not too short time. We had half a year to reach something, some results. And I don't know if it was unsuccessful or successful at the end, but we didn't reach anything else than a performance. These 35 artists, at the end of the day, they said, okay, you distribute the money because it's too complicated for us. There are 2 options. Whether the money will be distributed according to the needs. You are an artist, and some artists have big installations, some artists has a small sugar tower, it doesn't cost anything. So the other can have a double money maybe. Or be so, I don't know. But then, or shall this money contribution be the same to everyone? And at the end of the day, they were tired. The artists, they didn't want to go on and on with the discussion. They said, okay, you are here for that, you know, you do it. Even so, they said, our salary will be part of this money. If somebody wants to take this work of the curator, it can be. So it ended up as a kind of tiring debate, and the artists decided not to make any constitution because the aim or the idea was to make kind of constitution manifest, something to write down and say, yeah, we decided to do it so and so and so. But no, they decided to make a performance. And this is Kudro Eshun, who was here also. I think Hafiz told me that he was here part of the festival. He's part of the Otolit group. And his proposal, I think, was to make this kind of chaotic performance where every artist does something, but it's not really coordinated. So there was a long performance of 4 or 5 hours at the opening of this exhibition, where people were chaotically singing and jumping, and it was pretty interesting because it was kind of collision of different aesthetical, performative narratives and forms. They juxtaposed, or there were moments of silence, and then somebody was continuing. It was not really thought very well before, but there's certain chronology of this text. And then we did very normal exhibition, you know. The exhibition looked like a normal exhibition. I mean, we thought like it will be a revolutionary exhibition because we are, you know, doing something collectively, but really not. At the end of the day, the artists, they wanted to exhibit their works, and it was it. So I will, I think, finish here, and I will just say one word here. I prepared the third thing, but I think too long to talk to. But the point is that this is the future. I'm working on another exhibition now. It's the future, and maybe there will be a chance to discuss this with you. And this exhibition, the idea is about what is universal. What is universal? It's maybe too general question for you, but you have a lot of thinking and writing about this idea. today that universal values, universalism is idea, that there are some values that are shared by different cultures all over the planet. And this idea that there are these values somehow disappears today very slowly, or maybe some people say very brutally disappear. And people are asking, so is there a kind of common denominator of humanity or post-humanity? And what is this common denominator? How to name it? What is it? And here you have some quotes from interesting writers, philosophers, thinkers, that all, there are of course different lines of thinking, but one of them says that this universalism actually only can in the future appear as a conversation across differences, because this European universalism collapsed, to make it very simple. And I'm thinking to make somewhat an exhibition around this topic, and this is the last text I show you. I think it's pretty original because it's Boris Groys. It's a Russian philosopher that lives in US since some time, and he writes here about universalism slightly differently than all these post-colonial thinkers, because he's really, well, he's not orthodox, but he's pretty rigorous Marxist, and he's afraid of this idea of universalism that was ambition of avant-garde art, to create a universal values, universal visual language, and also, of course, it's related with the idea of communism as universal or kind of meta-political ideology. When it disappears, then the world will stay fragmented. Maybe it can be a question for you, for us to talk about how do you feel this do we need something like universal values or universal languages, or we are happy to stay to talk across different cultures, across different knowledges and different geographies. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you Fit, for the lecture. Any question? Oh, yeah. Lupa namanya nih, langsung aja. Ali, please.
Thank you, Fit, for your presentation and your lecture. I'm interested in your slide, the term of creolization. I have read in your slide. I would like to ask about the creolization. How was creolization applied in this context? I mean, particularly in Eastern Europe. And how did creolization become resistance or negotiation of universalism? And then how does it influence your practice? Thank you.
You know, what I try to do here, of course, to use the creolization term. Important, of course, in creolization is the ethnicity, right? I'm a white person, and I call creolization being something of that I can use. Interesting question. We consider we can, in terms of cultural creolization, language creolization, meaning that actually Western culture or Eastern Europe was from 48 to 89 was something very alienated, very hard. It was really, and it was not actually imperial culture or Eastern Europe. It was Western culture. It was something far, but it was used, it was creolized, it was translated, appropriated, and kind of adjusted to the means of the society. An example of creolization, I don't know if I'm right, but would be this sugar tower, for example. You know, you take minimalistic sculpture as a kind of symbol from center of art, as an artist that has no chance to exhibit or to make his works travel. You take the symbol and you make out of it very small, funny, ironical cover. And this I would call a creolization. It's a strategy how to use a dominant language of the other in a kind of ironical and subversive way. So that's how I would translate the use of this term for East European region. And I think this is problematic in a sense, as I said, is the ethnicity that when white people, white Europeans, trying to decolonize like other white Europeans, you know, of course, it's a different, completely different level of colonization. It's not the proper colonization, it's enslavement, for example. There was different type of subordination that was not slavery, but in English, I think, I don't know how it's called exactly, but it's kind of lower slavery in the sense that that the workers can't move but can make marriages. For example, they are not the direct ownership of its master, but it's a new, much lighter nuance, and maybe it's not at all the same relation, but still the power relations were quickly developed. And I think I would try to use this vocabulary in kind of metaphorical sense for these situations. That's the of subordination and power. And then it brings also again the question. Well, I would end up here. Like, I will not develop it further. I don't know if I answered your question. My example for globalization would be this sugar tower, and also the use of whether the strategies of that comes from that came from communist Russia during the communism, or that came from the West and were subverted after 89. I would be
Gimana Ali? Ada lagi pertanyaan yang lain? Dua orang dan duluan. Coba.
Yeah, hello. First of all, thank you for your insightful presentation in this morning. So my name is Leah. I like to ask your experience as a curator. How do you usually handle moment when you have a mental block? When I guess for the narrative or conceptual, doesn't seem like flow easily. So how you are handle about it? Do you have a particular method or a routine or mindset to help you overcome this creative block and regain clarity in your curatorial process? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yes, can I ask you, is it more, yeah, I understood that you are asking about curatorial process and conceptual art. How do you curate or how to approach conceptual art, like curator?
Yeah,
This one be, or maybe
like if your idea or conceptual doesn't seem like easily come easily. So how you handle it? Do you have a method or routine to what is it? Kayak overcome untuk handle.
Yeah, I get,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I get
Thank you.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I think usually curators now there are curatorial studies at the universities. You can study curating, and I think it's interesting because you see a lot of ways how exhibitions were done in the past. You know, you learn a lot about the history of exhibition making through these courses, but it's like it doesn't really learn you how to make a new exhibition. I think that's the problem. So what I try to do, I still at transfer. I hope that or it was my way to approach it that it should be pretty clear scenario or protocol. People need to understand what is the principle. And then there's kind of a narrative for example, is this spaceship or is this constitution? Then also I did an exhibition about the theater that was divided in three parts. One part was auditorium, second part was here, and the third part was backstage. Backstage, auditorium was the title of the exhibition. So I tried to bring some very simple, basic examples as of cultural or maybe ethnographical or other meaning, bring it to the museum, and then around this metaphor, make an exhibition. But everybody has different, approaches, and I think it should be a playful and somehow, well, I don't know if it's reverse, but I like very much humor, so it should be something funny also in the same time. It should be easily understandable. It can be complicated when you enter the exhibition because there are complicated artworks maybe, but the frame of an exhibition should be easily graspable for visitors, that it's easy to get your mind on something and then make it complicated afterwards, not to make it too complicated before, if it's possible as an exhibition. And also, I think it's quite funny to develop different presentations modes. Like I realized that we made many exhibitions that try to show one artwork in a different ways. For example, with the theatrical exhibitions, it was made a way that we asked the artist to show their one artwork, but then there are three ways how to show this artwork. So first was in the backstage, it was like show like in the museum, and then they wrote a description how this artwork should be shown on the stage. So there were two modes, not three. And then there was this auditorium that was always open and people could sit, there were different chairs. So I think what I like also to, if possible, to show that art can be seen not only one way, that it's hanging on the wall, but it has a different, ways. It's not only this way that one can look at it, but it can be also leaned against the wall, or it can be somehow shown outside the gallery on the poster or something. To show like the different regimes of showing the one work. I think that's I'm quite interested in that.
Yeah. Thank you, Vic. Yeah. But
Hi, Vin. Thank you for the lecture. I am Google. I really like how you connect science fiction and cognitive mapping with history in my practice with the group. called Sejarah. We work a lot through listening, using sound to understand social and ecological situations. So I'm wondering, do you think listening could also be a kind of cognitive mapping, like a way to imagine new relation, appears beyond the usual global art structures? That first, and maybe also when you talk about decentralized or federative models of knowledge, how do you see that idea working in place like Indonesia, where federalism has a complex and even conflicted political history? Could, that's all. Thank you.
So, so I think first, you're right that listening, but there's more and more, I think, works based on listening and sound. It was very popular in 1960s, sound experiments. Then again, I think at the end of 1990s, I met a lot of artists that worked with sound and with listening practices. And I think now it's also coming. Of course, it's not a typical media that to be commercialized or commodified. I think museums and institutions are more and more interested in exhibiting because it's a whole it's a whole universe that is attractive because we are overwhelmed by different information from outside. So to concentrate on listening on one channel is very important. And to this decentralization question, and I think today also that I think everybody sees, and it was clearly also expressed that the idea of the center and periphery is over. That there may be situations, there are cities where is more money available for exhibiting art, that's true, but in the same time, these places are collapsing, the institutions are in crisis, so everybody looks, and it was well seen with these quotes, you know, is the idea of the universe that everybody knows that the centers themselves, they cannot produce an answer that would be a global universe. They are even afraid to do it because they aware of the fact of colonial heritage and all kind of critiques from feminism to decolonization. So the institutions at the center, they are quite pretty paralyzed. And what they do, they maximum, they confer the power to the people that are invited from outside, for instance, so to say outskirts. So I think the central situation is over. Everybody is looking what is happening all over the world, on the planet, suddenly. And the problem now would be rather the visibility of these places, right? How to be visible that you can be anywhere. But this question of visibility is like with social media today more with the centrality and with the money, right? And decentralization is very interesting in terms of Indonesia. It's very, of course, a study. I don't know. I read the books of Benedict Anderson, for example, or other books. And there was a Czech historian of Indonesia, also Mrazek, if you remember this. It was quite amazing story. But I think it's a country where people come to learn how to live in this pluriversal mode. When we read these quotes, Indonesia is given as an example of pluriversal of languages, ethnicities, and cultures. So that's the example that the country gives, I think. So you should be aware of this and use it and promote it in a way, no? I think it's the real thing. It's not that it would be a kind of fake political statement or quasi. It's why people are so interested to come here and be here and meet artists because they want to learn and experience this.
Maybe you can share a little bit about your curatorial standpoint when you become a member of the Jakarta Biennale 2017, reading the context of social situation in Indonesia and its relation to the global context.
No, I'm always interested in the collections. I went to see the collections. For me, it's very important to see the historical collections. I mean, historical 20th century, right? And so that was for me very important to understand the contemporary art, was to understand how Indonesian art developed in 20th century until the independence, and of course after the independence. And there is an interesting observation from the point of view of what is called global art history today, because global art history, it's a new it's not new, it's old, 20 years, 25 years old term, but it started at the American universities, and it was invented in the US at the universities. And why it was invented? Because there were many Chinese students coming to US. They paid for their studies. They went to art history department, and they were always learned like, this is Greek art, this is Roman art, this is medieval art in Europe. And then they were there, they were saying, but there are thousands of years of Chinese and Asian art. I don't hear anything about it. And they say, well, you have to go to Asian studies. And they're saying, but now, I mean, we are the art history, it's part of the art history. So American professors, they were a bit shaking, they were saying, we have to do something. It's a real story. And then they created this idea, they had to extend the notion of art history to the whole planet. So, and that's one thing. And second thing is the modernity, for example, and the realism. So when I came here, I was really interested in the historical connections, mainly from 45 to 89. And then we of course, were much more dealing with contemporary art and inviting contemporary artists. But for example, for me, Dolores Asinaga was very interesting because she connected these realist movements in Eastern Europe and the social and feministic view here. So to find such connections, it's always very important, and also to see the development of abstract art as something ultimately avant-garde, but later on also capitalistic and social realism and socialistic realism, which are two different things.
Oke, ada pertanyaan lagi dari Mbak Grace?
Hello, Fred. My name is Grace. Let's roll the map again. You said about the DCD manifesto. DCD manifesto. Before, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the curating is not only neutral task of organizing artwork, but it's critical practice that how knowledge circulates. And in the context of global contemporary art, often demands narrative and aesthetic, but in here, how can artists or coordinators, because I'm here as curator, sustain local values without falling into the trap of exhaustive decision or fault processing. Okay.
Well, should you want me to remove it here? Well, no, I don't have it here. It was just an image that nicely shows the idea of over-identification of exoticism. For example, you can work with this idea wherever, that artists do that, they actually over-identify with this exotic view or concept that is projected on them from outside. If you want to deal with it, I don't know if it's still, it's for me, it's a matter of the language of the artist, the decision of the artist, and here I wouldn't interfere if he or she would like to identify with certain signs, languages, and aesthetics that could be seen as exotic. I think today it's not. It's an interesting question. For me, it's really a matter of artistic intuition and strategy. And I can only, as curator, look at it from outside and try to understand, evaluate, and put in context, but I wouldn't give a kind of judgment about it, right? I'm curious how people do it and what they think is needed. But I don't have a kind of prefigured judgment about it. And also one question or idea very often today mentioned that, and it's also, it's a mature generation because I'm teaching at an art school and I see a lot of young artists every year and very young artists, they are 20, from 18 to 20 something. And also in different schools, not only in my school, but this idea going back to the ancestral knowledge and to identify with certain cultures is seen and is criticized by older generation very much, this kind of almost as a kind of unsuccessful downgrade of their effort. Because it was shown maybe on this text of Boris Groys, he says like, avant-garde art, it was universal, everybody painted abstract paintings. So everybody from Indonesia to Chile to Norway could actually have the same painting. You can recognize so much like tropical abstraction from Norwegian abstraction. Not in reality, but actually it would be pretty looking all the same. While today we claim our cultural ancestors, identities, ethnicities. Does it make art not separated, fragmented? That's a question mark that this generation asks, the generation of Boris Groys. And I think it's a very interesting question because I feel in reality it's not true. But in the same time, it's unclear what is this common denominator to me. And it was a very good example was last Venice Biennale, for example. That was very much about this vernacular ethnicities, narratives, and stories, often from different parts, mainly from South America. While this idea of contemporary avant-garde art as a universal language completely disappeared, is corrupted and unaffected. And I think we are in this very moment, right? And it's quite exciting moment to decide or to have opinion about it, right? I don't know what you think about it, or if you feel the same, but because there is another question, maybe it's from a book. It's from a book of Clara Bishop, and she put one question very smartly, very well. And the question is, who can claim the morality to represent the pain of the others? It's quite a complicated question, but it's not so complicated, right? Who has the moral right to claim the sufferance of the others? And the answer would be, it is ethnically similar or ethnically representative to this group can do it, while the other groups cannot. So that's why we invite people on the basis of their ethnicity to speak about the suffering of people, right? And I think this question in this sense describes what's happening in the Arab world today. That this moral judgment to speak on behalf of suffering of the others is over as a kind of abstract idea. And what will be the future of this? That's the question, right?
Okay. Last question, Min, if there's another one. Maybe Lutfan or Adi wants to ask question. Adi? Ask question, eh?
Yeah, yes. Yes, yeah. It's interesting to connect with Martin lecture several days ago about this. You focusing about the universalism, and he also talked about the universalism in the perspective of South global South, in the term of the actual condition like catastrophe, chaos, something like that is as a condition, and also proposition to the perhaps answer or reply the universalism itself, and from that position to answer the last question you propose to ask, who is can judge the moral, something like that. Perhaps from that position, the chaos, the very marginal people or the situation of chaos itself is the who can answer. I think that maybe you can connect this to this global situation.
They think,
Yes, well, of course, the new universalism would be a kind of planetary ecology, entanglement of living, non-living, human, not human. That's the thesis of Platform posthumanism, other thinkers, and it's true, it is developing for sure. That's one new universalism, but this again, I think it's for me it's quite Western centered in a sense that it doesn't take in account what was, for example, this last Royce text that universalism is most valuable for migrants actually, because that's the problem. When the people migrate, they need this basic right, they need the right to eat, to shelter, etc. And the entanglements with non-humans in this sense doesn't help. They need to be secured as living humans. So I don't know if this posthumanist approach answers this question. And what you said, of course, well, there's a definition of democracy from Rancière, which is not bad, or from Beatrice Spivak, it's the same, that one has to look always from the position those that are not included, that are excluded, right? So always it applies not from those that are in the room, but from those that if and look for them if there's where people that have no access to basic rights. So that's also how to look uh, if your question was about that, how to not think about globalization, globality all the time, but to look at the globalization from those that are excluded and that are the most fragile and that are impacted actually by all this global damages, I would say, damages of globalizations. I don't know if I get it right, the question, but somehow it was my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, we are at the end of the fund. Still want last question now? We are in the end of this session, and just for information that it's still here for the day yesterday, tomorrow, and so until evening. Yeah, so friends can ask anything with Vin, especially for the curator to learn about the idea and the practice of creating. Okay, and give applause to Vin.